I'm Dr. John Gartner.
And I'm Dr. Harry Segal.
And welcome to this session of Shrinking Trump.
John and I began this show months and months ago. This is actually our 30th episode. And most of our episodes were before the election, before Biden dropped out, before Kamala hit what I thought was a terrific stride. And all along the way, we were noticing Trump's cognitive decline, his impulsivity, his problems with language. And really, John and I, every show, and they got longer and longer because we were putting together what we had noticed all week. We had noticed Trump flailing. We noticed his impulsivity. The line got terrible. And it was an advocacy show in the sense that we politically were afraid of Trump taking power. But our emphasis was the psychology of Trump's disorders and how they were getting worse and worse. And listen, we can't forget the Hannibal Lecter and the eating the dogs and the weave and all that stuff.
By the way, he's in the cabinet, Hannibal Lecter. I just wanted to, I don't know if you got that update.
He's working under Mehmet Oz. Is that
exactly?
Or are they the same person? I'm not really sure.
Well, he's the late great.
But really, since the election, the purpose of our show has to change because we're not amassing information every week to mobilize voters, to mobilize awareness of an impending election that could be so consequential and will be so consequential and so dangerous. Now I think we really have to talk about, well, we'll keep shrinking Trump, but we have to talk about surviving Trump. Mm-hmm. We have to talk about what this means for John, for you, and for me, and for our audience to deal with the powerlessness in the face of someone who not only won the presidency, but has both houses of Congress and a very sympathetic Supreme Court, to say the least. That's where we are. And so John and I have been really talking about what do we do to support each other, to support all of you, and also to keep you informed to some degree about what's going on, but not to inundate you with clip after clip, because I'm not sure that's going to help anybody. We'll keep track of things and let you know about it, but this has got to be a place where all of you can come without feeling you're being inundated by pundit and pundits and press. What do you think, John? Does that sort of summarize how we've been thinking about it?
Well, I think I feel like our thinking's been messier than that because I think our feelings are more complicated than that. First of all, I think there's a difference between you and I. I see this as more. We both see it as direly dangerous.
Oh, sure.
So we completely agree on that. That's why we had this show, right? We had a duty to warn, right? We were warning because we knew the danger was so dire. Yes. And actually, now that the bad thing has happened, our mission can't be just to warn about it because it's happened. So the patient's already died. You can't warn after that. But I think that, so part of what we're doing is instead of warning, we're mourning. And that's a completely different kind of set of gears. We're having to deal with our personal mourning. We're having to deal with our listeners, viewers mourning. And as you talked about last time, having to deal with our fear. A lot of people like the term used, anticipatory anxiety, because we feel like Thelma and Louise, we've gone off the cliff. And now we're just waiting for the boom. And the feeling of falling, not only helplessness, but the feeling of being in some kind of sort of free fall and not seeing a bottom, not seeing a way out. And so there is a level of, I think, desperation in terms of that sense of true dread, of existential dread that people are dealing with. I think one way people are dealing with it is by tuning out from it, and that's perfectly healthy. In fact, I think one of the things we're going to talk about later is ways to cope, and I think turning to our own inner light and turning to the relationships of the people we're closest to is a way to keep ourselves sane and to cope. families and have been enduring great suffering and persecution, for as long as there have been people. We've been very spoiled, and now it's sort of our turn in the barrel, I think.
I think that's possibly what's going to happen. I think, first of all, we have an interim where Trump has been very impulsive and dysregulated in these cabinet choices. And as of the taping of this on Thursday evening, he's already had one of his nominees crash and burn, Matt Gaetz. I think there's going to be institutional pushback on what he tries to do. I also think he's disorganized and it's going to get worse and worse. So for me, it's not that there's that it's fated that the democracy will fail and that people like John and me will be lined up, in front of a firing squad. It's John believes that, firing squad, and killed. I think things might go that way, but I think it's more the uncertainty. Like, it could get really bad. We don't know how the country's going to respond. There's so many unknowns, and I think that's what's so difficult. Is the unknown. I can't sit here like John and say, "Oh my God, it's over. It's going to be Nazi Germany. We're dead." Nor can I sit here and go, "Don't worry, everything will be fine. The institutions will hold." I don't know. I don't know.
It's more like the Daisy commercial. Do you remember the Daisy commercial? Now we're really showing our age. This is the most famous political commercial in history from 1964, shown only once, in which Lyndon Johnson tried to suggest that if you go with Goldwater, it's a crapshoot with nuclear war. And you've got this beautiful little blonde, like 8-year-old girl pulling off daisies going, maybe he will. Maybe he won't. Maybe he will. Maybe he won't. And then you see a mushroom. Goldwater. We can't take a chance.
It was a vicious ad, by the way.
It worked.
Of course it worked. And only shown once. But I think the point I'm trying to make, though, is that I don't think, John, your apocalyptic vision is certain. But I think it's so potentially true that I find it really, really scary, and I want to keep my eyes on it. On the other hand, we don't know how resistance will work. We don't know what the pushback will be. We don't know if he'll destroy himself in the middle of trying to destroy us. We don't know. And not knowing is what makes it even more frightening.
Yeah.
I mean, if we knew that this was a right now a fascist takeover, I would flee the country, or I would learn how to shoot a gun. There's all kinds of things I might do. I would go to war in a civil war to protect people. Who knows?
FYI, Spain is admitting digital nomads. FYI.
Okay, thank you. But my point is that it's not that clear. So part of what makes it harder for me is I don't know what's going to happen. And I can't know for a while because he doesn't take office until the 20th of January. And he can do lots of terrible things before then, but a lot of it is talk. Nothing is action. And we'll see. We'll just have to see. And so what I'm saying to our audience is I want you to stay with us on our podcast, because we're going to keep processing what this means to be going through this. And it doesn't matter that John and I disagree about how dangerous this is. We both want to support you all, to keep you informed, but not overwhelmed, as if it were a pre-election show where we've got 2 hours of clips about how crazy Trump is. I'm not sure that's going to help you. But what we can do is keep our eye on what's going on, alert you to what we see each week is really threatening, and also take it back to what it means to survive this period and to be empowered ourselves. I don't know, John. Have I won you over a little bit?
Yes, a little bit. I'm willing to admit that there's hope.
Bravo. My work is done. All right, folks, we'll see you next week.
Yeah, right. But let me tell you why I think it's very glimmering.
A little tiny sliver.
Tiny sliver. So, how tiny is it, John? Well, it's so
you need
so
a microscope
tiny
to see it, don't you?
Yeah. So let me count the ways. So look, we thought we would try to break things into bad news and good news. Again, in this effort to be balanced. However, people may notice the bad news is a little bit longer than the good news. Yeah, I put this sequence together. Okay. So Harry asked me to limit myself to two things. Okay. So I broke them into subcategories, of course.
Let me count the ways.
Right. So one is about that the theme of the cabinet being that they have a coordinated plan to destroy America. I call it the Destroy America Cabinet. And actually, Trump posed with the cabinet in the cabinet room, these cabinet appointees. Maybe we can show a picture of that. That's that. There they are. For those of you who are just listening on Spotify, whatever, actually, it's a picture of Voldemort at a conference table, and all the Death Eaters are sitting around looking like executives or looking like they're in the members of the cabinet. I think actually I'm going to start calling this the Death Eater cabinet because they're fundamentally evil, and their aim is to destroy the agencies that they're being put in charge of. So I didn't even have time to go through all the cabinets. I know I went through a lot of them last time, and people don't want to do all that. But I want to first talk about this general concept, right? That and show that everyone is agreeing on this. That the goal, the Project 2025 goal, is to destroy the government. Let's first hear what George Conway had to say about that.
He doesn't have a mandate to engage in the sort of destructive behavior that he has engaged in the last 24 hours with these three picks. And let me dilate on that a little bit. These three picks are truly as bad as you could imagine. If you were actively trying to do harm to the country, to destroy the country, these are the kinds of people, if not the people, you would pick. And I'm going to say something here just to, we're only 9 days into this. We got 4 more years to go potentially here. I've spent the last 6 years talking about Donald Trump's psychological makeup, that he is a narcissistic sociopath, a malignant narcissist, and that those characters, and you've heard me say this multiple times, are inherently destructive. And I've written a lot about it. I've talked to a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists over the years. There's one additional thing about this kind of character. And I learned this from a very prominent Harvard-trained psychiatrist here in DC 5 years ago. People like Trump, malignant narcissists, actually do subconsciously or consciously seek to destroy. And one of the things about people like Trump, and a lot of humans generally, is they like to accuse people of what they themselves are trying to do. You've heard it said about Trump many times, every accusation is a confession. Well, that's what's going on here. Deep down, he's a destructive force. Deep down, he wants to destroy. And mark my words, it's only going to get worse.
So I think the important thing here psychologically, we understand that that strong men want to empty out the institutions that might oppose them. But he's bringing it back to Trump's psychology, which was, of course, our original starting point. The malignant narcissists get a glee, they get a charge, get a thrill from destruction. They're kind of like pyromaniacs. They burn things down just to watch them burn. And by the way, the psychiatrist that he was quoting was Justin Frank, who we've had on this show a couple of times. And he said the same thing here, but we had actually underestimated the glee that Trump takes in destruction itself for its own sake. So when we say that he's hiring these people to be kind of stochastic terrorists in their own organizations and be kind of clownish and almost there's this kind of random quality of craziness, you know what I mean, thrown in along with the repressiveness, because there's a part of him that actually revels in having contempt for the institutions.
No, of course, but and really these are just flamboyant people who will do what he says. It's
Absolutely.
really not about whether Matt Gaetz is no longer in the running, but it's not like Matt Gaetz' philosophy on the Justice Department. It's just that he'll do what Trump tells him to do. That's all it's about.
Yes, the Gatesian philosophy is obey the strong man.
Right. Right. And
That's the Gates doctrine.
And pay 17-year-olds for sex. Like that's the doctrine.
Yeah.
God,
by Venmo.
What is
actually somebody got a hold of this. They had I don't have this graphic, but because Gates wasn't our topic today, but it's all the women he's Venmo'd and how many times.
Oh,
and
no,
it was
he
quite a graphic.
He should be governor of New York. All right, let's keep going.
Let's move on. All right, so here's what the New Republic had to say on the same topic. Trump's real goal with these disastrous cabinet picks exposed. An authoritarianism expert broke down the real purpose behind Donald Trump's cabinet nominations. Each of them individually is historically bad, said Snyder. But taken together, these are not people who are going to be bad at their jobs in some sort of normal sense. Taken together, these appointments suggest an attempt to actually make the American government dysfunctional, to make it fall apart, to pervert it, to have it do things that it's not supposed to do until it's not capable of doing anything at all. So and Snyder, of course, is the expert on authoritarianism, and he's saying this is part of the dictators, the authoritarians.
No, he's terrific. And don't forget the Gates and the Freedom Caucus, you remember when they were holding back the funding for Ukraine and for the government, their goal was to disrupt and make the government so dysfunctional that the country would then want a strong man to come in and fix it. That was the point of what he was doing.
Right. No, this has been part of the Republican playbook more broadly. You're right. Just to kind of throw sand in the gears.
The pro-Trump people.
The pro-Trump people. And actually, what's interesting, we're going to hear from Ed Luce, but he's comparing this to the fall of the Roman Empire, and comparing Trump to Caligula, who put a horse in the Senate. Okay, is almost as bad as Matt Gates.
Smarter.
But also the point being that it was also an intention to collapse the institutions from within. So in other words, what caused Rome to fall was not the barbarians who invaded it. It was the emperor who collapsed the institutions from within. Let's hear that clip.
All right, let's get to Ed Luce's latest piece in the Financial Times. It's entitled Trump's Demolition of the U.S. State. And you write in part, quote, "It's time to study Caligula. That most notorious of Roman emperors killed what was left of the republic and centralized authority in himself. Donald Trump does not need to make his horse a senator. It will be enough to keep appointing charlatans to America's great offices of state. Rome was not destroyed by outsiders. It was demolition work. It was the work of barbarians from within." Pete Hegseth, Trump's nominee to run America's sprawling military bureaucracy, was considered too much of a security risk in 2021 to protect Capitol Hill from protesters. Matt Gaetz, Trump's pick for U.S. Attorney General, reportedly won the Mar-a-Lago beauty contest by declaring, "Yeah, I'll go over there and start cutting effing heads."
So later we're going to hear actually the interview with the author of that article, Ed Luce. But that's the overall picture, right? Now, Harry, you've raised this question of, okay, they're going to try this, so now we know what they're going to try, right? But how much resistance are they going to get, and how much pushback can they get, and what's that going to look like, and how can we help if we can?
Exactly.
What I'm seeing is that this is going to be a rolling persecution. Okay, that in other words, it's not like they're just going to come in and say everyone's fired and then they're going to fight back. That there's going to be a process like that's going to keep churning. Okay, and people are going to keep being thrown off at each sort of turn of the wheel. So look at the things. I want to point out some things that they're doing right now to thin out the workforce.
Okay,
federal workforce. Remote work crackdown. How Trump's DOGE could push federal workers to quit. Okay, so in this article, what he explains is they are going to be, so apparently 1/3 of the 3 million people who work for the federal government work remotely. And they're saying that from day one, all remote work for all workers will be canceled, that all workers will have to be in the office 5 days a week or they must quit. Now, he did this in at Tesla. He did this. Well, of course, Twitter he hollowed out completely, but getting rid of remote work and that causing people to quit is something he's done in his own companies.
But he needs congressional approval.
Does he?
For this? Absolutely, he does.
That's not something that he can do by executive order?
No, absolutely not.
Oh, okay. I actually, we should get back to the people about that, or at least try to look into that. That's a great question, though. Who has the authority to do that? Now, he's announcing it, right? But that's not the same.
Yeah, but he announces stuff all the time. He also said he was going to build a wall and make Mexico pay for it.
Well, I think Musk is a little more competent at accomplishing his stated goals.
I think. Listen, Musk is stating policy, then it has to be approved. Look, he has 2 houses of Congress. They may well pass this. I mean, I think it's important for you to bring it up, but I don't think you should see it as like this can be done with a
wave of a wand.
Are you kidding? There's a huge union for federal employees. You think they're going to let that just be done, magically? No, they're going to fight it.
Well, that's what we hope to see, right? That's what we're going to need to find out. The other thing they mentioned in that article is they're thinking of moving the location of many of our federal agencies just to some other location where the people who work for that agency don't live.
Okay, we'll see if
that might cause a few people. That might cause a few people to quit.
I think that will cost millions of dollars, but all right, we'll see.
Okay, so let's see more about what Musk has to say about his plans. Musk and Ramaswamy vow, quote, mass headcount reductions in U.S. government. The leader of President-elect Donald Trump's new DOGE panel have promised extensive cuts to federal regulations, spending, and personnel. Musk and Ramaswamy argued that recent cases decided by the conservative majority on the Supreme Court will enable major reductions in federal regulations. After Trump, quote, nullifies thousands of such regulations, DOGE will then work with, quote, embedded appointees across federal agencies to, quote, identify the minimum number of employees required for an agency to perform its essential functions. This line appeared to echo Musk's broader business philosophy and past practices. Musk oversaw the reduction of roughly 80% of the staff of Twitter, the social media platform he later renamed X after he bought it. So that's the goal. So you're right. We can't predict. We don't know how successful he'll be, but they're coming. You got to believe, though, that of these 3 million federal workers, at least 1 million of them are having discussions around the kitchen table, right? How bad is this going to get? Is he really going to do this? If he cancels remote work, what am I going to do about childcare? You've said, well, they can't do anything bad until they take office. And I would disagree with you about that. They've already done some bad things, and they're already having an effect. That these kitchen table conversations are the beginning of an exodus, of an emigration, of people voluntarily self-selecting themselves to leave. And that's what they want. They're talking about, you're going to give them buyout packages and early retirement. They just want to get them out.
Or it's also mobilizing the unions to talk to their people, telling them to hold fast. I mean, it's just, you don't just wipe out 1 million people working for the government. But I don't like the fact that they're talking about it. I think Vivek Ramaswamy is a monster. And but I am pleased that Trump is starting to get impatient with Musk, because he's never going to tolerate this guy looking better than he is. He never has. And his relationships never last more than a few months with people.
Well, you said that last week, and since then there have been news reports about, like, he's sort of like the guest that never left Mar-a-Lago, and it is starting to get on Trump's nerves. It's got on everyone else's nerves, and now it's starting to get on Trump's nerves. So let's hope you're right. Let's hope the snakes turn on each other.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
All right. So the other thing I want to talk about is this kind of way in which they're putting out threatening messages that I think are meant to strike. I'm calling it the reign of terror, not in a reign of terror like they're shooting people in the streets, but that they're raising a kind of wave of terror, right, within these institutions where people are already starting to wonder, what the hell's going to happen to me? Let's start with one of the most important ones, the military. Trump transition team compiling list of current and former U.S. military officers for possible court-martials. All of the officers were involved in the chaotic U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, which independent reviews have blamed on both the Trump and Biden administrations. The Trump transition team is compiling a list of senior, current, and former U.S. military officials who were directly involved in the withdrawal from Afghanistan and exploring whether they could be court-martialed for their involvement, according to a U.S. official and person familiar with the plan. Officials working on the transition are considering creating a commission to investigate the 2021 withdrawal from Afghanistan, including gathering information about who was directly involved in the decision-making for the military, how it was carried out, and whether the military leaders could be eligible for charges as serious as treason, the two sources said. Treason.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of the military justice system? You know how involved that justice system is within the military? Military courts have their own thing. It's been around for 200 years. You think they're going to just bend over and let people just suddenly court-martial people without procedure and process?
Okay.
I think this is hot air. I do. I think it's hot air.
Okay.
But it's still dangerous. I don't like it.
All right. But Ed Luce is very, very concerned about specifically about Trump and the military.
And I was the one who found this quote because it sent chills up my spine.
I'm most concerned by Peter Hegseth. Trump's real complaint about the Pentagon in 2020 was that it resisted Mark Esper, Mark Milley. They resisted the Insurrection Act. They resisted the politicization of the military. And Trump came out of that saying, I was betrayed by the military. They did not swear an oath of loyalty to me. They kept saying their oath of loyalty was to the Constitution. Well, Pete Hegseth fully agrees with Trump. He thinks it's a woke DEI, politically correct organization, the Pentagon, that needs to be cleaned out, and that needs people, 3-4-star generals need to be vetted to check their loyalty to the commander-in-chief, not in the abstract, to this one. And as you know, there are certain people like the FBI director, who I think, Chris Wray, who I think Trump probably does want to remove and, God forbid, replace with somebody like Kash Patel. But there are protections for a lot of these jobs. There are certain fixed contracts. For generals, there aren't. You can get rid of them as commander-in-chief. You can get rid of them for whatever reason you like, and you can promote a corporal. If you find that corporal more congenial, you can just have them leapfrog several levels and become generals based on their loyalty to you. And that's Pete Hegseth's role, I think. And that's the most worrying, therefore, to the future of the rule of law in this republic.
Yeah, well, you did pick this tape, Harry. Why did it send chills down your spine?
Well, I didn't realize that the generals could be so easily fired. I did know that you remember Alexander Haig, who was Nixon's national security advisor.
I am in control.
Right. Well, Nixon had promoted him to all this high rank of general over the complaints of the military that didn't like him, and Nixon enjoyed promoting Haig over the complaints of other officers. So this really scared me, and I think if Trump is able to fire all the generals and replace with people who do what he wants,
right?
Then if he told them to fire on demonstrators, they might.
Exactly.
They might. But there are still institutional pressures against that. Look, this is the thing that scares me the most.
Well, I'm glad you brought this film, Harry. I really am. I think it's really important. And here's the thing. Institutions don't protect themselves, just like the Constitution can't protect itself. It's a piece of paper. Okay.
Oh, I get that.
People have to protect it. But that's why they're focusing so much on purging people. And you're right. What's scary about what we just learned, and I didn't know that either, about generals, that that basically everyone in the military works at the pleasure of the president, and he can promote or demote anyone he wants. obviously he can continue to promote and demote until he finds someone who says yes. Like, let's just say, to be very simplistic with this, will you shoot the students at Kent State for me? No. Okay. How about you? Will somebody volunteer to? Yes, I will. Okay, you're now the general in charge.
And the military has a long-standing belief in serving the Constitution, not the president. They're not allowed to follow orders that are unconstitutional. They can be court-martialed for it. There's a lot. There are John, this is not just some freestanding banana republic that has, like, the militia. It's a Pentagon. It has traditions. It has safeguards. He could be the military if he's coming after them. They have military intelligence. They could frame Trump. They could blackmail him. You don't look. J. Edgar Hoover ran the FBI for like 50 years. You know why? He had dirt on everybody. I'm just saying there's it's not simply okay. You're all generals, now go shoot people. It's just not going to work that way. Okay. And if it does, we're ready to fight it as best we can.
Well, I think that then one thing very logical for Trump to do, right, is to try to give legal orders to implement his evil will.
Right.
Okay. Well, like, for example, what if on the first day of his presidency, he declared a state of emergency that gave him extraordinary powers, right? Because it's an emergency to deploy the military. Well, guess what? He tweeted about that. So Donald Trump is retweeting something true, 3 exclamation points. And what he's retweeting is Tom Fitton saying, good news. Reports are incoming that at real Donald Trump, the administration is prepared to declare a national emergency and will use military assets to reverse the Biden invasion through mass deportation programs. So let's just game this out. Let's say that under the conditions of a state of emergency, it is legal to deploy the military. And now he's demoting the generals who have a conscience or who have a memory of the institution or the institution, right? Until he gets, Corporal Hegseth, you know what I mean? Who says, sure, sir, I'll do it. And okay, you're the general. And it's not an illegal order because, first of all, by the way, nothing I do is illegal because the Supreme Court has said that. This is in the course of my official duties. I'm telling you to kill college students.
He can order things that are unconstitutional, and that's the issue. It's not just that he may be free from being prosecuted after leaving office, but that doesn't mean that the military is going to obey unconstitutional orders. And there's a big tradition not to. But look, if he declares a state of national emergency over the border, which is insane, but he'll do it. But we know he's going to do this. He is going to round up, immigrants. Now, if he rounds up, 20,000 who are criminals, that's one thing. If he really wants to go after 1 million, and if his Nazi guy, what's his name? That horrible.
I think it's important to know his name and know that he's a Jewish Nazi.
I know.
One of our boys made it. So
Stephen
just to
Miller?
show that Stephen Miller, just to show you're a leader in the Nazi party.
The fever dream, as Ron Brownstein said last week, of having internment camps outside of large cities.
Exactly.
Listen, I don't want that to happen at all, but if it does, it's going to cause an incredible rift in the country.
Well, no, I think there will be. First of all, I think it is going to happen. That's just what I believe.
I think so too.
And I think that it is going to cause a tremendous rift because it's so inhumane.
Right.
It's so grotesquely inhumane and so in your face. People, as you said, are going to be filming it with their cell phones. I think people are going to be going to these camps and protesting. But we're going to be seeing images of children crying in the middle of the night, holding their little teddy bears while they're being, loaded onto a van.
But the important thing about Trump to remember is that he really wants good ratings. And when the family separation happened in his first administration, it's the only time he ever backed off. But we'll see. I mean, it terrifies me. Of course, I don't want a national state of emergency, which is not the same thing as martial law, by the way. But it is it's a step towards it.
Yeah, but he'll convince Corporal Dummy, Corporal Christian fascist white supremacist that he recently, elevated, that it is, because he's a dummy and he doesn't know the difference.
And he may not be. He actually may not get. He may not be appointed. We'll see how. See if the Senate does.
But it doesn't have to be Hegseth specifically, though. I'm just saying that it's.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're
you
right.
know what I'm saying.
Right. You're right.
All right.
All right, you have one
so
more.
I said I was going to limit myself. So that was the military. The other pillar of our democracy that's being eaten by termites and moths as we speak is the free press. Okay. Here's the thing. We're sort of celebrating Matt Gaetz, withdrawing his nomination. But, we talked about how Trump does this kind of flooding the zone with lies, flooding the zone with outrageous acts. So we almost can't split our attention between all of them. And I think that's what he's doing with these cabinet picks. So we're focused on Matt Gaetz and, but he's flooding the zone with people who are mortal threats to democracy. One of them that you might not be aware of, because a little under the radar of the average, is Brendan Carr, who is now the head of the Federal Communications Commission. He's one of the central authors, nominated. Yes. Yeah. I don't think the Senate's going to block him. He's one of the primary authors of Project 2025. Oh, the one he knows nothing about. I know nothing about it. I mean, just how stupid can people be? But anyway, he's a primary author of Project 2025. And let's learn a little bit about Mr. Carr. Trump picks Brendan Carr, who laid out the agenda in Project 2025 as FCC chairman. Carr vowed to take on, quote, censorship by big tech companies in Project 2025, which laid out a conservative agenda for Donald Trump's second term. So let's see what that agenda is. Carr, 45, the senior Republican among the FCC's 5 commissioners, has vowed in recent days to take on what he calls the censorship cartel, including Facebook, Google, Apple, and Microsoft. Earlier this year, he laid out an aggressive agenda for the FCC and Project 2025, a conservative proposal for Trump's second term developed by the Heritage Foundation. Carr has been a vocal supporter of billionaire Elon Musk and an advocate of tougher restrictions on China. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to open the floodgates. We're going to force all the social media companies and the internet companies to stop moderating content and to stop distinguishing between Russian propaganda and truth. Okay. So that's the first order of business. Let's see the next one. Carr also indicated that he would scrutinize TV broadcasters in instances that Republicans view as political bias through the narrow legal authority that the FCC has over such issues. When Vice President Kamala Harris appeared on Saturday Night Live days before the election, Carr blasted NBC for trying to evade an FCC rule requiring networks to give candidates equal time. NBC later said it gave Trump a commensurate slot following a NASCAR race. And finally, let's see about what he wants to do with Elon Musk. Pending decisions before the FCC include whether to allow Musk's Starlink satellites to orbit closer to Earth, which would make its internet service speedier and a fiercer competitive to traditional broadband providers. Carr has advocated for Starlink to receive hundreds of millions of dollars in FCC grants. Musk's social media platform X also stands to benefit from Carr's vow to scrutinize its rival internet giants such as Facebook and Google. His deregulatory views and his affection for Elon Musk are well known. I expect few surprises, said Andrew Schwartzman, a veteran telecommunications lawyer. So he has an agenda. And the reason I'm pointing this out, of course, I mean, it's obvious. The free press is so important. But we've noticed that the mainstream press has started to tilt towards the right? So in addition to the fact that we have the conservative info structure, right, with Fox and all that, we also have noticing that the mainstream media is becoming more and more timid, right? Or at least more and more balanced, in part because it is being bought up by a lot of conservative corporate entities, So Elon Musk bought Twitter, now X.
Ruined it.
It ruined it. Liberty Media has bought CNN. And you and I disagree, but I think there's been a shift, not a radical one, but some. But you and I disagree about that. But Liberty Media, Liberty Media is a conservative. Some people do.
Yeah, but all right. Unless you can show me how it's more biased, I don't. All right,
I'm going to bring that in next. I'll research that. Springer bought Politico, and then I mentioned Sinclair bought the Baltimore Sun. This is happening a lot. But what's also happening, Harry, is there are corporate entities who are not conservative, who are not biased, who are not ideological malefactors of great wealth. Okay, they're just trying to earn a living, right? Because that's what a company does. That they're trying to succeed financially as a company. Well, Brendan Carr has figured that out, and look what he's doing to threaten CBS and NBC. Let's start with CBS.
There's a lot the FCC can do. Broadcasters are differently situated than other speakers. They get free access to a valuable public resource, the airwaves, and they're licensed by the FCC. And the exchange for that is they have to serve the public interest. I think it's important that we take another look at that and we reinvigorate it. There's also a news distortion complaint at the FCC still having to do with CBS, and CBS has a transaction before the FCC. And I'm pretty confident that news distortion complaint over the CBS 60 Minutes transcript is something that's likely to arise in the context of the FCC's review of that transaction.
I'm sorry, let me give people some background because they probably didn't understand what just happened there. I should have set it up better. CBS's parent company, World Paramount, has negotiated a $16 billion acquisition of Skyhorse Productions. It's an important business deal for them. Okay, $16 billion deal. And what Brendan Carr was saying, but the FCC has to approve such deals. And what Brendan Carr was saying, we're not going to approve that deal until we've resolved this bias of news complaint against CBS News. And what is the bias of news complaint? The bias of news complaint is that 60 Minutes interviewed Kamala Harris. Of course, they also offered to interview Donald Trump. And for the first time in 50 years, a presidential candidate refused to be interviewed on 60 Minutes. So that's kind of on him. But what they claimed was that CBS deceptively edited the video to make Kamala sound intelligent when really she was, an idiot. And CBS has said, it's true that we edited the transcript, but we've edited the transcript of every person who's appeared on our show for the last 50 years. We have a certain production values. We're an entertainment company. That's what we do. We only do it so that the answers will be crisper and simpler and the pace of the show. But he's calling this a bias of news complaint. And here's the important thing. He's holding a gun to their head, a financial gun to their head.
You do know that the FCC is a panel.
Mm-hmm.
And that people are appointed for certain months of time. So it's not like he can go in and say, we're done with this thing because of 60 Minutes. He has to have the entire FCC panel behind him. And they are very reluctant to act against mergers and things for these kinds of dumb reasons. So we'll see what he can do. It's not so simple that he's now the czar of, he can just scrub a deal if he feels like it.
Well, it's a good point. We don't know who's on the panel. It's probably normally it is a balance of Democrats and Republicans,
and they're appointed for overlapping terms.
For certain overlapping terms. You're right.
You can't wipe them all out and put in your own people. It doesn't work that way.
Right. Well, that's a good point. But let's they might find some way to get a majority on the panel.
Well, but John, it's a hideous thing for someone to say, who's coming into the FCC. Regardless of whether he can do it or not.
Exactly. It's part of this threat environment. And my point is not that he can stop that he can or will stop the merger, but this is extortion. This is where the mafia guys come into the shop and they say, "Nice little story you have here. Shame if anything should happen to it." and it works with Fortune 500 companies too. They get just as intimidated as the little guy with the bakery. And now let's see how he's threatening NBC. I mean, I just want to warn people because they're wondering, what the hell are they talking about? So what did NBC do wrong? Okay, well, the thing that CBS did wrong is they had Kamala Harris on a news program. Okay, well, the thing that NBC did wrong is they had Kamala Harris on Saturday Night Live. I don't know why that's so terrible. Maybe he can explain it.
What should be the ramification here?
Yeah, we need to keep every single remedy on the table. I mean, one of the remedies the FCC has ultimately would be license revocation if we find that it's egregious, and we'll see what they have to say about this. But it needs to deter this type of conduct, because when you're 50 hours before the opening of Election Day, the whole purpose of this rule is to give people a fair shot.
Now they're invoking the fairness doctrine.
I think he's full of hot air. But
Okay.
but it's an awful thing to say.
Right.
Let's
And so
leave it
you may
right
be right.
there.
I don't think he's going to revoke NBC's broadcast
Yeah.
license over an SNL appearance, but I think it's a chilling effect. And the thing about these corporations is they're conservative, they're risk averse, just like everybody else. And so they're going to be having private conversations. This is what I mean about the reign of terror beginning now. It's psychological, Harry. That's as psychologists, that's the point. They're really getting inside people's heads, right?
Yeah.
And getting them scared. And it's going to affect their behavior, is what I'm predicting.
It may. I mean, I think Saturday Night Live had some pretty great stuff on their weekend update in the last episode. I mean, it doesn't seem to be stopping the writers at SNL, but we'll see. Right. It's not good. It's not good. I mean, I don't like it.
It's not good. It really just how bad is it, Harry? Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, that's my truncated, very, very carefully edited and curated list of the bad things for this week. You had a couple of bad things too. You want to talk about?
I'd really just have one because I thought we would keep that sort of smaller and talk more about how scary this all is. But here we go. Actually, the Monday after the election, I woke up and I have an iPad and I watch Morning Joe, and there's Morning Joe. There's Joe Scarborough and Mika sort of coming clean that the previous Friday they had flown down to Mar-a-Lago to meet with Trump. And they said, well, we're covering the news and it doesn't make sense for us not to have not to welcome everybody on the show, especially since there's now a new government in power. And we just went down there to sort of to clear the air. And then they said that it was all on background. They couldn't reveal anything that they heard.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know if they said to him, challenging him on the insurrection and stuff like that. And don't forget, it was Matt Gaetz who told Trump that Joe Scarborough was responsible for a death of one of his employees, which made them furious at Trump and furious at Gaetz. And now they went down to see him. And I was really
you're disappointed.
I just thought it was cowardice and it was self-serving. And they were very busy, like saying why it was an okay thing. And the week before, after the election, they were acting like everything was normal. It's sort of like, you've been screaming about the death of democracy for like 6 months, and now you're going down to see the sociopath, president-elect, and you went down and talked to him.
It's amazing. It's amazing what a difference power makes. Right? We are we're apes, basically. We're chimpanzees. Okay. It's like, remember that scene in, Battle for Planet of the Apes when Koba, the evil Koba, is fighting the good Caesar, but for dominance, and they're having this big fight and all the apes are just watching. And it's clear Koba is evil and Caesar is good. But if Koba throws Caesar off the cliff, we're going to obey Koba. That's how it is. That's just how it is. And we're gonna submit. We're gonna go like this. We're gonna make some gesture of submission. Okay, and that's what we're starting to see. What Snyder calls, obeying in advance. Right?
No, I hear you, but John Howman was being very clear about how dangerous Trump was on the first Morning Joe after the election. There are commentators who are being very tough on him. We just quoted Ed Luce, who's like the editor of the Financial Times of London. I mean, but Joe and Mika, for me, it was really a disappointment because I kind of like
friends.
them.
You have coffee with them.
I'm a fan of them, and besides, I think of John and I think of us as an old-fashioned two-man team. There's the funny guy and there's the straight man. And that's kind of disappeared from modern comedy, but I think Joe and Mika kind of pull it off really well. So I have a fondness for them. And the other thing about Joe Scarborough, which I haven't said on the air before, but as right-wing as he used to be, as much as he's pompous and he's funny and he goes on and on, he teases everybody, he's almost never wrong about politics. And I've kept very careful track of it. And he never said Kamala was going to win. Never said it. He said it was very close. He never predicted it. And And so when Joe says something like, for example, he predicted Matt Gaetz would survive, he's now saying he doesn't think Tulsi Gabbard or Hegseth are going to survive.
Oh, that would be good news.
And he's saying it because he seems to be saying that the Senate is holding its institutional position. Not that they want to prove almost everything he wants, but they're not going to go for recess appointments, which would be a constitutional crisis, literally would be. And it would be a disaster. And also he said the intelligence community, the senators on the intelligence committee are so appalled by Tulsi Gabbard, they're speechless about it. He says there's at least 4 votes against her. So
I'm very glad to hear that.
So this is my bad news. Now, John,
but that was good news. What you said about the Senate, that was good news.
It's great news, and that was going to be my good things.
Yeah, so that was it. You shot your wad. There you go. There was your good news.
Well, I don't know if I shot my wad. I think there's too many sexual predators nominated for Congress.
This is the sexual predator cap. Isn't that? I think that's a requirement now. At least one conviction or indictment for a sexual
accusation
crime. Or accusation. If you don't have at least 3 women accusing you, it's like you need 3 letters of recommendation to apply to graduate school. You need 3 accusations to be part of the Death Eater.
Yeah, and they'll let you do it. When you're famous, they let you do it. Can you gonna play the Rex? Can you play that clip?
Since you're talking about Joe and Mika, right? I wanted to show you that. Okay. Yeah. So I brought. So this is a tweet from George Conway. He's retweeting Brian Stetler. Brian Stetler said, according to 2 sources with direct knowledge, Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski were credibly concerned that they could face governmental and legal harassment from the incoming Trump administration. And George Conway retweets this and says, sadly, Brian's reporting is correct. Over the past week, I've heard from 2 entirely separate, very reliable sources with some vivid detail that they are absolutely terrified of Trump. And so I think you and I have discussed this already. We see this a little bit differently. You see it as opportunistic. They want to be in the loop because now if there's going to be 4 more years of reporting, they want to have quotes and conversations. And you may not be wrong, but I don't think this reporting about their being scared is wrong either. For one thing, they should be scared. He's talking about using the government to go after people in the press.
Okay.
No, well, and the thing is that, look, so he's going to go for the people at the top of the food chain first, right? And so, for example, you and I have jokingly, not joking, talked about when would we know that we might have to flee the country. We've had these conversations. I mean, I've had them with you, but I've also had them with my wife. I've had them with friends. I've had a dozen people say to me, have you thought about the fact that you might need to flee the country?
Hey, John,
what?
Just turn down the volume just a little bit. Come on, man.
Well, I'm just saying, the thing is that what everyone says is, you and I have jokingly said, well, they're going to come for George Conway first, right?
Well, that's true.
Right. Because he's on the A list. He's on the A enemies list. Although, to be honest, it's a little unfair because it's very political who gets on the A list. It's really who you know.
It's who you know. Thank you for that,
Kevin. So I don't think we're on the A list, but,
listen, you've been a really an out front activist on this. I think I'm in a safer position than you are. But no, but really, my feeling about this is it may be that Joe and Mika are afraid, but I think they're covering their opportunism. Look, when you're in the public spotlight, you get threats all the time. They've been getting threats forever. They've been calling Trump crazy and unfit for 8 months. You really think they're flying down to Mar-a-Lago and having a conversation with him is going to stop people wanting to kill them? I mean, or whoever, the crazy people out there. And besides, if I made as much money as they do, and I had as many viewers as they do, like millions, I think I could afford to hire some security.
Yeah, but it's not just stochastic terrorism they're worried. They're worried about persecution and prosecution from the government.
Well, but that's not what it said. It said they
it is what it said. No, you're wrong, Harry. Should we put it on the board again? I want to look at that tweet again.
All right. I'm sorry.
Well, you're wrong. I don't know what to tell you. According to 2 sources,
governmental and legal harassment from the.
Yeah, that's what Brian Stetler is reporting.
Okay. Well, Sorry, that goes with being a journalist. If you're going to be persecuted by Trump, then just keep doing your job, and
listen,
don't act like a coward. It's just nonsense. You do what you do, and if it's that bad and he starts to harass people, then you leave the country. They have millions of dollars. I'm sure they can live just fine in London or wherever they want to be, and do their show. I'm just sorry. I'm just impatient with it.
Look, the thing about this enemies list, Harry, it's sort of like your draft number. So, we think we're safe until they arrest George Conway. Actually, I was talking to one of my patients. I don't know if any of your patients are talking about this, but he was talking with his wife about when they might have to flee the country. And he said, look, don't worry. They're going to arrest Dr. Gartner before they come for us.
Listen, this is not, look, there were people in Nazi Germany and Europe who really didn't know what was happening.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This is not the world we live in now. If they start coming after people, it will be everywhere. It will be on social media. It'll be on TikTok. It'll be on your phones. There's going to be a resistance. If that starts to happen, we'll have advance warning. If they mess with Mika and Joe, they can go public on their show and talk about how they're being persecuted. And that might actually have an impact. I don't believe this for a minute. I think they just want to be able to interview him and have more Republican guests on their show. And it's despicable. And I'm so annoyed with them for it. And Nicole Wallace.
Are they not your friends anymore? Are they not
Nicole Wallace would never do such a thing.
That's true.
Neither would John Heilman.
I know you have a crush on Nicole Wallace, but
she's an important person in my life.
Another one of your imaginary friends. Okay. Anyway, Harry, you had some good things you want to talk about, right? Happy things.
I don't have imaginary friends.
Well, they're real people, but you're just imagining they're your friends.
No, I just I appreciate what she does. I don't pretend that I know her. So for my good things, well, the first thing really, and was what I said a few moments ago, that it looked like Matt Gaetz was would lose support, and he did. And rather spectacularly, by the way. And the Senate, so far, is saying no recess appointments. And a lot of really strong Republicans, like Trump people from like North Dakota and stuff like that.
Yeah,
they're saying there's a whole process, advisor consent. We take this seriously. So they are sending signals to Trump, cut it out. And what the signals he's been sending is, you belong to me.
Right.
He's testing it. And because he's suffering from early onset of dementia, he's being impulsive and not very thoughtful about it. He could do this a lot better than he's doing it. I think this is part of his being dysregulated. I mean, Mitch McConnell, John Thune are never going to put up with this kind of stuff from him. They'll approve most of his appointees, but not the pressure to give up their prerogative. I just don't see it. And if they do, that's another sign, John, that everything is falling apart.
No, that's right. And so we need to keep an eye on that. I'm glad that you're focusing our attention on it.
John, we have to keep an eye on everything.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do for our audience is to do that for them.
But this is definitely a front line. This is a front line. This is really where the rubber's meeting the road right now.
Right now, this is where the action is, because he's not in power. So the action is, can he force the Senate to do what he wants? And so far, no. And I wouldn't be surprised if Tulsi Gabbard and Hegseth are not confirmed. He'll put up other terrible people who will be more easily confirmed. But remember, they didn't even use the FBI to vet.
Oh yeah, Trump is saying he doesn't want to. Yeah,
but now he's mad that Hegseth didn't tell him about this. This employee of his he paid off not to talk about the fact that he roofied her at a conference. And
right, but that's okay. That. What he's upset about is that it's come out.
Well, that he wasn't told about it in advance. I mean, it's ridiculous. All right. The other good news was a David French article from the Times. Rex, you want to show the cover? Donald Trump is already starting to fail. That was quick. Donald Trump is planting the seeds of his own political demise. The corrupt, incompetent, and extremist men and women he's appointing to so many of the most critical posts in his cabinet are direct threats to the well-being of the country, but they're also political threats to Trump and his populist allies. To understand why, it's important to remember a cardinal reality about Trump's political career. He has now won 2 general elections when he was the only alternative to an unsatisfactory status quo, and he lost the one when he was the unsatisfactory status quo. If he can't govern well, his populist partisan realignment will come apart before it can truly begin. And I think that's right. French is very smart, and I thought that made me feel better. So, John, are there any good things in your life?
Well, no, but yes, but I wanted to elaborate a little more on what you said. I think this is really one of the hopes, right? I mean, if there is a way out, right, one of them is that he'll produce so much reactance, right, with his mismanagement of the economy, which is, everything he's doing is destructive to the economy. Tariffs are destructive to the economy. Restricting immigration is bad for the economy. Increasing income inequality is bad for the economy. Buying crypto with government money is bad for the economy. So something's going to happen, and also, hopefully people will be morally appalled by the images where they see. And so that's the hope, right? That he'll be so unpopular that we'll have a chance to vote him out. But I do worry that because these people are so corrupt and so conniving, that we may not get another chance at a free and fair election, at least not in the presidency. That they may be getting. They've been studying how to manipulate the infrastructure of voting from the beginning, right? I mean, that's why Tina Peters is in jail in Colorado, because she let Sidney Powell into the voting room, and she could take all the software and give it to probably the Russians, most likely. And then there was the Cyber Ninjas, remember, in Arizona, because they were doing this big recount, and the Cyber Ninjas was a very shadowy company. No one had ever heard of it. Only had 2 people. It was formed 2 minutes after the election, but they opened the kimono and let them have all access to every aspect of the voting infrastructure.
Yeah, and they found more votes for Biden.
Well, but what they also found is access to software that probably has back doors. Or, you know what I'm saying? That they got. I'm just saying.
I think they weren't confident, but I'm listening.
Well, I mean, look, if that's the case, there's no point in even telling people, right? Because it's all is lost, right? I mean, if we're never going to get a chance to have a free and fair election again, then we're dealing with a much darker reality, and we may be.
Most people think this last election was absolutely fair and a free election.
All right. Well, part of the problem is the better they can get at this, the more it can be hidden.
It's dangerous, John. I'm with you, man. But again, let's not rush to 2028. I mean, I do think we have to look to 2026 for the midterms. We need to get the House back. Now, I want to ask you, because remember, we're trying to help our audience to think about this stuff. Right. What are the good things in your life that has helped you in the past?
I know you tasked me with coming up with 2 pieces of good news.
Yeah.
And I really tried.
Okay.
I really thought about it. I scanned the news and I thought, there's gotta be something good that I can find. But you know what? I came up empty as far as good news on the global scene. And what I thought about was the good news is I'm very excited that my grandson is coming to visit next week.
There you go. That's okay.
But the reason I mentioned that, I mean, sounds a little bit like the joke, right? That you actually told me about the doctor who's talking to his patient. He goes, "Well, I've got good news and bad news." Well, what's the bad news? Well, the bad news is you're gonna die in a couple of weeks. Oh my God! What's the good news? Well, you see that beautiful nurse she and I have been dating for 3 weeks, and we're having a great relationship. So the bad news for all you is the world's falling apart. The good news for me is I'm seeing my grandson this week. But in a way, I think this is also relates to this issue of how we cope.
Thank you.
I'm getting there. Because we do have to, as the saying says, hug our children tighter. We do have to affirm the relationships that we have that maintain our humanity and maintain our morale. And we're going to need to sustain ourselves with these bonds. So this really gets more to the coping issue, since we are feeling very powerless, and we both don't have power, and we don't know what's happening, right? So it's uncertain, and we feel powerless. So there's a real feeling of being up in the air. I don't want to say free fall because that's too negative, but
well, but John, listen, I'm not asking you not to feel scared and to feel this as severe a danger as you experience it. I'm glad you can talk about it. I mean, you can be hopeless on the show. I don't feel hopeless, but I'm alarmed, and I am taking pleasure in things. I guess what I would say is, at Cornell there is a student group that offers what they used to call EARS, EARS, which is it was a peer counseling program. They've now, because of legal issues, now calling it peer mentoring, but it's basically peer counseling. And they ask me every semester to come and talk about difficult things like suicide and what do you do when you hear things. And I love these kids. There was like 50 of them in a room, and I just went and riffed for like an hour. And there was this young woman. I mean, they're all young, but she had a head covering and earrings, and very, very poised. And she asked me a question that was so good about a friend of hers and what they were saying and how she was listening, that I had to stop her and say, what are your plans? Are you thinking about a clinical career? I said, it's such a wonderful question. Well, I spoke to her afterwards. She's on a 1 semester visiting as an undergraduate from Indonesia, and beautifully fluent in English, and wanting to get a clinical degree in Asia in order to work with people in her area. And she was just so poised and so inspiring. And it made me feel better about what's going on in the world. And I don't know, it's, we find our comfort where we can.
Yes.
And I do think it's,
inspiration and beauty where we can.
And we can't only focus on the dangers.
Well, and actually, that brings me to my second thing. As you know, I'm writing a book about psilocybin therapy, and it's my new quest, or my new mission. And we can't be so overwhelmed by the darkness around us, right? Because there is some light within us. And part of what psilocybin therapy is about, the working title of the book right now is The Enlightenment Cure. That I think that it's neurologically, in the way it's working in the brain, it gets the default mode network to stop functioning. So that's really the part of the brain that actually controls what we would consider to be the ego. Everything having to do with the self is connected to the default mode network. Psilocybin and meditation cause that default mode network to go down. And what happens is you have more of an experience of pure consciousness outside of the normal boundaries of your ego. So that's why they call it ego dissolution. And it produces the trait of mindfulness that meditation also produces. And so what I'm trying to say is, look, if I'm right, okay, and things are going to get really, really dark, then we need to find a light within. It's sort of like, hey guys, enlightenment now. Okay, like, remember that Seinfeld? Serenity now, serenity now. Well, guys, if the world is being eclipsed, if you're in the shadow of the valley of death, enlightenment now, enlightenment now.
Well, I think there's many ways of. John's talking about psilocybin treatment as having this powerful impact on the neurochemistry of the brain, and I'm sure that's true. But there's also this. There's a whole psychology of flow and allowing yourself to be engrossed in a creative moment or in a creative period, whether it's playing music or listening to music or writing. And there's all kinds of ways in which we can delve into the parts of us that have spontaneity, that have honesty and creativity. And I don't think it will come to this, but even in the attic where Anne Frank's family holed up, there were these beautiful things she wrote. and the boy she loved and the family that she related to. I mean, there's beauty even in the darkest of times. And I don't, I'm hoping it will never come to that here. I actually don't think it will, but as scared as we may be, don't lose sight of who you are. Don't lose sight of the joy in your life while being vigilant, while letting us do some of that for you. You can bring us your unhappiness. You can bring us your worry, and we'll scan the horizon for difficult things each week, but we won't inundate you with them, because we also want you to live in this moment until a time. There may be a time when John and I are mobilized towards a very active resistance the way that we were before the election. There may be times ahead where John and I aren't going to be sitting here going, "How's everybody feeling?" Like it may not always be like that, but right now, I think it is.
Well, speaking about how people are feeling, last week we went over some viewer comments, and we wanted to do that again this week, again to kind of address how people are feeling and to reflect it. So maybe we could look at some of those, and some of these were really quite dark and painful.
Do you want to take turns reading them out loud?
Yeah, that sounds a great idea. Let's do that.
All right.
So I'll read the first one, and then let's alternate. The election results felt like the death of my existence. His cabinet nominations feel like during my dying process, someone is gut punching me with each wretched individual name he submits. All the while I'm gasping for my last breaths. Thank you all for helping me through this. I mean, that's a real raw description of pain.
So direct.
And I identify with it. I mean, and I'm sure many people out there do too. It is a gut punch. And it feels like while our soul is being murdered, we keep getting stabbed with each of these appointments. Each announcement is just more horrible than the next.
Harry and John, another great discussion. All my friends are so upset they won't, or can't talk about this disaster. So I've been enduring the post-election trauma alone until I found you. Listening to you and seeing how caring you are for your audience has been a light in the darkness for me, a real godsend. Also, love the laughs. Can't thank you enough. I'm so glad people think we're funny. That's all I really want.
but actually, the reason I picked this one is I think a lot of people are suffering alone.
Oh yeah,
without the people around them validating, especially if they live in a red state or they have Trumpian relatives or Trumpian spouse. And so I just wanted to pick that comment because she was saying what was so therapeutic for her about watching the show was having her reality validated.
Yes, yeah, that's wonderful.
Harry and John, I'm a mortician, funeral director by trade, and I have unfortunately seen an uptick in suicides. I think that while validation of people's feelings is helpful, I'm glad to hear you talk about how to cope with them. Optimism and hope are the lifeline for many during this tumultuous time. Thank you for all you were doing.
Wow. I remember seeing that one too. I remember learning years ago that suicide rates follow unemployment. I mean, it's such a terrible choice to make.
Yes, but I think this is a public health expression though of the psychiatric pain that so many people are going through. So if you subject half the country to intense psychiatric pain, some small portion of those people are going to be pushed towards suicide. And I predicted that there were going to be more suicides. And so the fact that he wrote that and that he's seen it himself, I thought that was important.
I always say to my patients, it's a final solution to a temporary problem.
Yeah, no, you're right, Harry.
Dear Harry and John, I've been listening to you since May from Sweden. You're not alone in your grief in U.S. We're following this closely from Europe, and November 6th was a sad day. You give me hope. Thank you for that. We Europeans need your sessions as well. I never thought that horrible clown could be elected again.
We've got a lot of comments from Europe, from Canada, from Australia. And I think it's just the whole world is really in pain and aghast and terrified. I think people maybe in America don't realize how international the horror is.
Oh no, the Europeans. And for all of the destructiveness and the life-changing impact of social media and digitization, how you and I can just start a YouTube show and people find us from all over the world effortlessly. I mean, that's the good side of all of this connectivity, I think. And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's look at this next comment. Dear John and Harry, I'm an 86-year-old Australian woman. I was born in 1938, a time of world chaos and untold cruelty being unleashed upon humanity in the lead up to World War II. I'd always hoped that when my time comes to leave this earthly existence, I would be leaving a more just, loving world. That hope is now completely dissipated. We are teetering on the brink of world disaster beyond comprehension. We are all in this together. Much love from Australia.
No, and that's beautiful. There are right-wing governments coming to power. Yeah. It's already there in Italy. Marine Le Pen in France is gaining ground. I mean, it's not just here.
Yeah,
and which is really.
But it's sad to think about someone who began their life in World War II.
Oh, I know.
To feel like they're not going to live much longer, but they're seeing the world come full circle as their turn around the sun ends.
No, I'm glad my mother didn't live to see this, to be honest with you. I am.
Wow. Yeah.
Although I wish she had lived a little longer than she did.
Yeah, but that's a powerful statement. Well, Harry, why don't you read this last one? I think you'll like it. It's good news.
Okay. My dear Harry and John, putting all seriousness aside, I just love you two. It's hilarious how John gets so silly talking about throw up in his throat and specialized toilet seats for the well-endowed. And then Harry is uncomfortable and tries to shut John down. I'm sorry to the serious folks who think I'm being irrelevant and irreverent. I feel that because there's been nothing to laugh about. It almost feels foreign to feel laughter coming from my throat rather than vomit, which I feel mostly as well. So with all due respect, I so enjoy a brief respite from the heinous worry we're living with. So I thank you. And Harry, I tend to mix tenses, so I apologize in advance. Oh, what a lovely note. So funny.
Yeah, that's sweet.
Oh, man. We're grateful to you all. You make it so much easier for us in this time. We're not just trying to provide support to you. You provide support to us. We're in it together.
Well, I'm very excited about our guest this week. We have Joe Walsh. A lot of you may know him from MSNBC. He's an MSNBC contributor. He's had quite a journey. He began as a social worker and then became an actor and then became a congressman from Illinois' 7th District. He began as a more moderate, then he evolved actually into a Tea Party candidate and was part of that sort of revolution, and then actually had a kind of Pauline conversion of sorts. I'll let him describe it if he wants to. And he's now been for a long time a never Trumper. And actually he was in the movie Untruth with me as one of the talking heads. And he has his own podcast, The Social Contract with Joe Walsh. Joe, thanks so much for coming.
It's so good to be with you, man. I'm sorry I'm late and I'm sorry I look like shit, but it's great to be with you.
Oh, come on. You're wrong on both counts. Also, now I can see the actor. Now that I know you were an actor, now I can imagine what those headshots looked like.
No. That's all I did was take headshots.
Yeah, right. So, Joe, I have two questions for you. Just two very simple questions.
Uh-oh.
What the hell happened? And what hell is going to happen? And when?
I'm assuming that what the hell happened is not what's happened to me. What happened 2.5 weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
I think it's pretty simple. I've said this a bunch on TV. A demagogue who lies to working class people defeated a political party that looks down right now on working class people. They went with the bad guy over the party they thought was out of touch. Which is too bad.
Right. More than too bad. It's like he's a bad guy, but he's our bad guy.
And he's worse than a bad guy. I apologize. I gave up my career, my livelihood to oppose him. He's worse than a bad guy. He's
I know.
Fucking horrible, despicable human being, pathological liar, and he tried to overthrow an American election. And I could go on. I've given
up a large part of my career for the last 9 years, also for the same purpose. So,
yes.
And look at what we've accomplished.
Look at us.
We'll pat ourselves on the back. All right. Well, the other question then is, what do you think is going to happen now? A lot of people are talking about this. Some people are trying to be optimistic. Harry and I disagree, actually, on this show. So in some ways, it's good. We balance each other out. He's a little more optimistic. I'm a little more fatalistic and see really these sort of dire domino set of consequences. But it really does feel like we're kind of in Germany after the 1933 election and waiting to see if the democratic institutions are going to hold.
I was in Congress about 10 to 12 years ago. And when I was in Congress, and people would ask me publicly, what's the state of our democracy? Back then, before Trump, I didn't know that this country could stay together. I thought it couldn't. I thought our democracy may be like in the fourth quarter with 3 to 4 minutes left. Trump's an ugly, broken product of where we are. I'm a dark Irishman. I'm with you. I say expect the worst. Prepare for the worst. There's been an utter lack of imagination in this era of Trump. Just a fucking lack. I mean, 20 years ago, if we're all sitting here 20 years ago, and I told you that an American president would lose an election and he would refuse to concede, you would have said, I'm drinking. And then if I would have said, but then that same American president will commit crimes trying to overthrow an American election, nobody would believe me. We've never used our imagination to understand how bad he is and what he's capable. I'm expecting the worst.
Yeah. How do you see it unfolding, and how quickly do you see it unfolding?
Well, he's currently clearly trying to here's the deal. So he's convinced millions and millions of Americans that our government's the enemy. And I'm a small government guy, but the Justice Department is our enemy. The FBI is the enemy. The intelligence community is the enemy. Dr. Fauci and all the doctors are the enemies, military, all the rest. So he's convinced them that they're the enemy, the voters. There's this deep state that's been after him from day one, when it's the exact opposite. So I think he's entering this term to go after these agencies and institutions that he believes have been after him. So Gates, who's now gone, but everybody he's putting in charge, wants to put in charge of these agencies, will be tasked with getting his revenge and getting back at people in these agencies who he thinks wronged him. I think we're going to see a lot of that.
Mm-hmm. It seems also like he's trying to hollow out the institutions. They're trying to encourage people to quit. They're not letting them work remotely. They're moving agencies. They're giving people packages. They're trying to create an atmosphere that will sort of. Elon Musk has said he wants to empty it out like he did Twitter. He wants to have the minimum number of employees in every department, essentially to keep the lights on, essentially to perform the essential functions. So then they will have total control over all of these institutions. There won't even be anybody in the building that knows where the manual is. They just know how to turn the buttons on and off.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't think that's Trump, because Trump's not an ideologue. Like Reagan, who I liked, and you guys probably didn't, but Reagan back in the day believed in a real limited government. If I were president, I'd try to respectfully downsize government. Trump doesn't give a shit about any of that. The one beautifully consistent thing about Trump is all he cares about is Trump. He believes these agencies have wronged him. So this is a personal vendetta with him.
It's a vendetta.
Yeah. Now, Elon Musk, again, what a goof, but maybe a whole different thing. Elon and Vivek, maybe they want to tear down government. They're not going to really be able to do anything. That's just all, to me, a game and an act. But with Trump, this is just personal vengeance.
Wait. So Joe, you don't feel that they can tear down these institutions completely? Are you saying they're going to hit a wall in these?
Well, yeah, when I speak of like Elon and Vivek, whatever this outside DOGE, this agency, they have no freaking power. They have no power to do anything. Like Trump says, maybe because Elon wants him to, I'm going to close down the Department of Education. That can only be done via an act of Congress. And by the way, that's really complicated. So Trump, the executive branch, can't do anything on their own. Elon and Vivek aren't even part of any government agency or entity. They're basically just, I think it's just a publicity stunt. They're going to make a bunch of recommendations, but they have no power, no authority.
Well, they did just announce that 1/3 of the federal workforce are remote workers, and they just announced that all remote work for all workers will be terminated immediately, which is certainly going to make that 1/3 of the workforce think about looking for other jobs.
But I missed that. Who said that?
That was Elon and Vivek. They've made an announcement.
Well, swell. I'm going to have a big, tall cappuccino tomorrow morning. I guarantee fucking you. And that's an announcement. Elon and Vivek do not have the authority to do something like that. Yeah. But you make, this is a really important point. And this makes me so sad because the millions and millions of people who support Trump used to support me, not millions and millions. But they were my people too. We live in a post-truth world with them. Yeah. The truth doesn't matter about anything. So Elon and Vivek can say all remote workers who work in the federal government, they're gone next week. It can't happen. It won't happen. But his supporters will believe it.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the wall that never got built that somehow got built.
Isn't that something? And that's why, like, he talks about mass deportation.
Yeah.
By the way, Obama deported more people every 4 years than Trump did in 4 years. And Obama did it much smarter.
Sure.
But yeah. So Trump was going to build a big wall from coast to coast, 2,000 miles. He built 52 miles of new border wall. When he talks about mass deportation, I generally believe it's just a stunt. What he'll do is what every president before him's done. Go in and try to deport the 500,000 to 600,000 violent felons who are in this country illegally.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, so there's some ways in which you're saying it's not going to be so dire.
Oh my God! Now I'm disagreeing with you. Yes. Well, I think a lot of.
You see, I'm even darker than you, Joe. You didn't think that was possible, but now you've met your match.
Well, I think a lot of the legislative, the policy stuff he wants to do, like in his first term, won't be nearly what he said it would be. I think a lot of the overreach, the executive overreach, the authoritarian crap, trying to shut down networks, trying to go after his political opponents. I think he'll do a lot of that, trying to use the military to go after Americans. I think he'll do some of that.
Okay.
Now there's, Ed Luce was talking, Joe, about his fear of having someone like Hegseth or any crony of Trump, because what he said was that all the generals can be fired for no reason. And you can promote a corporal to general if you want. So do you see a military suddenly becoming much, much more under the control of someone like Trump?
Absolutely. He's so pissed at the generals. Donald Trump despises the military hierarchy, despises. But he's such a fucking coward. Like Trump has the power to get rid of any general once he's president. He can do that on his own. So he's talking about creating this outside board that will go after woke generals because he doesn't have the courage to do it himself. But yes, he will. Look, he's going to go after the top people in the Justice Department. He's going to go after our intelligence people. He's going to go after the upper echelons of the FBI. And he's going to go after military generals. He believes all these people have wronged him.
But do you think that he could take out so many and promote people who no one has ever heard of to general? And then, because once a leader has the military doing what he wants, then we really are talking about a dictatorship. Do you think that's a possibility?
Yes. Look. Okay, so here we go. Use your imagination. I think there's a distinct possibility that he won't go after 4 years. I think there's a distinct possibility that, as you just said, he will slowly, over the course of 2 or 3 years, put his people in the upper echelons of the military and then try to use the military to help keep himself in office. I just prepare. What are you prepared to do, in Sean Connery's dialect? Be prepared for the worst.
But is that something you predict? I mean, it would be difficult for him, wouldn't it, to put in so many toadies in the military that he could just make them his personal police force? I mean, would that be a stretch?
So the good news is, yes, the good news is we were caught off guard the first time around with him. The good news is we were caught off guard on January 6th. If Mike Pence was standing between us and all hell, if Mike Pence had done the wrong thing, oh my God, how that would have blown up. But we weren't ready. We were not prepared for January 6th. We knew it was coming. The good news is we have wised up now because we've seen what Trump is capable of. But the bad news is he was an utterly incompetent fool the first time around. He's still a fool and an idiot, but he's not 100% incompetent. And my other big fear is I do a lot with law enforcement. I do a lot with rank and file military guys. The rank and file law enforcement and military are much more with him than people realize. And I just think
that's interesting.
There are people in this country who want a strong man in the White House. His supporters do. He knows that.
Because, in terms of this, how easy or hard would it be? I mean, in a way, I'm just sort of thinking this is a math problem, right? How many generals like a word problem? How many generals do you need to fire and how many flunkies do you need to promote before one officer will follow the command to fire on the students at Columbia University?
Yeah. Yes. It'll get to that point. I say this whenever I speak publicly. Almost half the country has given up on democracy. They want their America back, and they only believe a strong man, an authoritarian, can give them their America back. They don't believe the democratic process can do that anymore. This is the world I come from on the right. I talk to these people every day. So in a weird way, the more authoritarian Trump acts over the course of 4 years, he's going to gain stronger support among half the country.
That's an excellent point. That's a really scary point. We keep thinking he's going to shock the conscience, and you're saying they're going to go, yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Well,
absolutely.
But I do think that when you're president, you never know what's going to happen out in the world. I mean, he was totally decimated by the pandemic. We don't know what's going to happen out there. He may get himself in terrible trouble in certain ways. And he's also really, he doesn't like to work or think. He's really kind of lazy. And John and I have been sort of talking about his cognitive decline. I mean, it's not just that he has a severe personality disorder. He's got early onset dementia, and we saw it all the time. And although he's not going to be doing rallies, it's going to interfere with his ability to do anything.
That's a really good point, because this will make everything he does seem so much more erratic. I mean, look at the first couple of weeks since the election.
Yeah,
some of these appointments, and he's already publicly talking about court martials. He's said he will use the military to deport.
That's right.
He's talked about getting rid of, recess appointments, working with the Speaker of the House to ignore the Senate's constitutional role. So he's lashing out and erratic. I think it's a combination of he is more nuts with his basic, ugly, authoritarian, self-interested streak.
Yeah, because part of the early signs of dementia is people lose their ability to self-regulate. They become more impulsive. His lying got much, much worse. I think he's going to look more and more disorganized, particularly if there are terrible stresses. Because again, he might be tearing down the government, but he's also going to be the president of the free world. I mean, there's going to be a lot happening with him.
He's got one of the differences. He will have true believers working for him. In the first term, because he didn't know what he was doing, so he didn't know who to hire. He had a lot of institutionalists that he hired.
Exactly.
He's going to surround himself with true believers. So to your point, if he, ends up talking to himself every day, the true believers around him are going to have, weirdly, a lot of power.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a process of his unraveling, and there's a process of his destroying the institutions. It's almost like a race between the two of them.
And let's not forget, Biden just turned 82, but he's gone in a couple months. Donald Trump will be the second oldest dude ever to serve in that office. He'll be 79 next year. I can't imagine what his constitution is like. He eats like shit. He doesn't exercise. He could die in a year. And we just don't. We don't know what's going to happen. J.D. Vance, who knows?
I want to ask you some questions about the media, because a lot of people are saying, oh, the Democrats didn't message this, the Democrats didn't message that. And then I think when I was watching all her speeches, she talked about that all the time. The economic plight, for example, of the working people, and concrete proposals as to what she would do to help them. I think there's a bigger structural problem in the media. Obviously, this isn't an original idea at all. But in the New Republic, I wish I could remember the name of the author. He said, why don't people know the real reason? Was that Tomasky? It was Tomasky. Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. Michael Tomasky. Why don't people know the real reason we lost the election? He's saying, look, it's the information system, stupid. They have a counter narrative for reality, right? With Earth 1 and Earth 2, what Nicole Wallace calls Earth 1 and Earth 2. Earth 2 has its own organs of communication, but now what they've done is spread and taken ours. Okay, so Elon Musk took Twitter. Liberty Media bought CNN. In my hometown, Sinclair Media bought the Baltimore Sun. Springer in Germany bought Politico. And now with this new FCC chairman, Carr, he's putting intense pressure on the networks and on the social media companies that he's going to lean on them to moderate less. And also, he wants to, quote, prosecute them for having Kamala Harris on their shows. But basically, he's threatening their license. He's threatening to blow up their mergers, other unrelated business deals that will hurt the parent company. So they're going to find ways, I think, to put even more intense pressure on the media. You're a talking head, so I'm putting you on the spot here. We love Joe and Mika, and some people are really, really angry about them going to see Trump. And other people are saying, George Conway tweeted they were genuinely terrified.
Bullshit.
Okay, my point exactly.
Sometimes George Conway fucking pisses me off, and I love George. Joe and Mika, no bullshit. You know what? Those of us who there are so many of us. Like, I get death threats every other fucking day, and it's been this way for 6 years. The hate, my friend Adam Kinzinger, the shit I'm sorry.
I'm sure.
Joe and Mika, relax. They made a calculated move based on what they thought like it was a ratings move. It was a horrible thing to do. It was every bit as bad as Joe Biden inviting that guy into the White House a week or two ago. This rush to try to normalize him. The guy tried to overthrow a fucking American election. He's pledged to be a dictator. Joe and Mika, you don't normalize that or sit down with that. Okay. To your broader point.
Yeah.
Afraid. My God, we're all afraid. To your broader point, I just think traditional media is kind of gone. I go on CNN a lot. I go on MSNBC a lot.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me if cable news were gone in 3 or 4 years. It's more. I think it's more that people are going outside right, to get their information. They're going to Joe Rogan, they're going to podcasts, they're going to websites, they're going to all these independent people to get informed. I'm all about the marketplace, but there's literally, I don't know. I honestly don't know what the answer is to this.
The only thing I would say to John is, and I agree with it, there's been this consolidation on the right. But when Ron Brownstein was looking at the exit polls, the public was completely aware of what Trump was doing. What they were against his anti-democratic and his insurrection. They're against rounding up millions of people. They're against abortion bans. But they like his stance on the economy, and they want to go back to the America that they wish they had. But they were informed. They just voted for him anyway.
Well, and remember this, guys. This is what made me sad the day after the election. Trump did better than he did 4 years ago. We're not just talking about his base. A lot of people voted for him who didn't vote for him 4 years ago. I was out there campaigning for Kamala in a battleground state every day for 3 months.
Oh, wow.
And I'd get so many people who'd come up to me and say, Joe, I know he's a bad guy, but I don't care. I want the economy back. Joe, I know he's a horrible guy and he lies a lot, but God damn it, the border was secure. There was like an I don't care caucus out there that kind of held their nose and voted for him.
Yeah.
Which also means that there could be a lot of reaction to terrible things that he does.
Yes.
See, that's where my hope comes from.
That's a great point. If he literally tries to deport people beyond the violent criminals, and again, there are 500,000 to 600,000 of them in this country. If he just got rid of them, 90% of the American people would applaud. Presidents before Trump have done that. But if he goes beyond that and tries to get 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 million people out of this country, and there are pictures of parents and kids being separated, you're right. Most of America ain't expecting that.
Okay. Well, so, I think in some ways you're providing a more optimistic picture than I'm portraying, and more consistent with what Harry's saying, which is that there will be resistance, there will be reaction. I'm not sure what the reaction to the reaction will be. In other words, I don't know if they give a shit how people feel about it.
Trump really likes ratings. I think he believes in two things: tariffs, because it's a simple idea that he stupidly believes in, and ratings. He does not like. I remember I was interviewed for a documentary before Trump's in 2020, and they said to me, "Are you afraid that if he's reelected, he'll go to war?" I said, "Absolutely not. His base doesn't want to go to war. He's not going to push his base into war." Now, he may ask his base to go to war within the country against other people, but he's not going to. His whole thing is he knows what the people want, and they don't want to go to any more wars. It seems to me.
That's true, but he also knows his people want a strong man in the White House.
Yes,
and so a lot of this Project 2025 stuff is generally about strengthening the office of the presidency. Loyalty oaths and all the rest, and weakening Congress. He's going to try to do as much of that as he can.
And that was sort of William Barr's thing, right? Was to make it a kind of imperial presidency.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And by the way, again, we're all students of this country. The American presidency 10 years ago was a presidency that our founders never, ever envisioned. Plenty of our founders didn't even want the office of the presidency. So the power of that office over the last 100 years has grown immeasurably.
Yeah.
Trump wants to take it to a dark place.
Yes. Yep. As much power as he can amass. And as John and I have been talking, because of his personality disorder, he also wants to burn everything down.
In a malicious way, in a destructive way.
Yeah, not for any ideological reasons.
Right.
He believes in a small federal government.
Right.
These people, he's convinced half the country that he's a victim. That from the moment he came down that escalator 9 years ago, The deep state's been after him, when in reality it's the exact opposite. But because he's the victim and they've been after me, he's got to spend 4 years tearing them all down.
So I'm going to ask a last question for me, at least, and then we'll see if Harry has one. But what do you think people can do? This is what people are asking me. My brother he came on the train from Washington to see me for lunch, which he never does. He's a constitutional law professor. And I thought, and he had lunch with me. He said, John, I've just been thinking of everything that I think could work, and I can't come up with one thing. Do you have an idea?
Oh my God, John, I get asked that everywhere I go speak.
I'm sure.
Because people are so despondent right now. And unlike in 2016 when he won and there was utter shock and the resistance was born the next minute, these people. There are a lot of people on the left now who I'm checking out. I'm not going to look the next 4 years. That's bad for a resistance. You know what can we do? We're out of power completely right now. Completely. Utterly. What one thing we can do is work our asses off to help the Democrats take back the House in 2 years. They won't take back the Senate. They have to take back the House.
Yes.
That's one concrete thing. And then the other thing is just this notion of the resistance. If and when he starts to overreach, we have to fucking take to the streets.
Absolutely.
And I think the words civil disobedience are going to come into our lexicon like we haven't seen in a long, long time. The other thing we can do is pressure people to reject as many of these cabinet picks of his as possible. But I need more than that. We need more than that.
We do.
Yeah. Well, Joe, thank you. Harry, did you have any other questions?
Well, Joe, first of all, I want to say, I've watched you and listened to you for years, and I'm just so glad you're on the show and you're doing all the work you're doing. And there's just a personal favor. If you could say hi to Nicole Wallace for me. I'm a big fan.
Nicole Wallace, I love you. Oh, in person. Harry, I will say hi to Nicole. She's wonderful.
What is this, like the fifth grade? You want him to tell Nicole that you like her?
Harry, pass me a note. She's wonderful. But like so many, she was despondent. She was sad.
Of course.
We should, maybe you two were ahead of me, but I should have seen this possibility better than I did.
I think Nicole
didn't see it.
Well, I want to thank you for all the campaigning you did. That you've spent 3 months. No, really, I do. Wonderful. I want to thank you. It's I know it. It's bittersweet. It's funny.
I've never worked so damn hard to get a Democrat elected in my life.
I'm sure that's true. Well, thank you, Joe. I'm glad you're on our side.
Hey, this was fun, guys. Great to be with you. Happy to promote. Do it
Thanks
again.
A lot. See you. We'll do
Definitely.
it again. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you. Well, I guess that brings us to the shrink wrap portion of our show. What did we learn this week?
Well,
what do you want to end with?
I have something to end with, but I guess I just want to say first that I really appreciated having Joe Walsh on the show because, there he was working every day for Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
Really wanting to stop the danger of Donald Trump. And it's people like him who are out there that give me some hope that if things get very terrible, we have some soldiers on our side. I guess that's the first thing I would say. And the other is, folks, we need your help in figuring out how to manage this time between Biden and Trump, and then afterwards as we watch things. So let us know what you think. I also wanted to mention that we will not have a show next week. It'll be the first week that we've missed since April. But for Thanksgiving, we figured no one's really going to be looking for us on Friday, and we need a little bit of a rest. But we'll be back in 2 weeks. John, do you have one last thing to say before I read this thing that I have?
No, actually, I'm really interested to hear the poem. I think I've said what I have to say, but again, I think that we do have to focus on our inner selves. I'm just going to repeat myself, but just that this is obviously a very solemn and scary time, we need to. I love the fact that you made reference to people's ability to create beauty even in hard times. I'm even thinking about things like Elie Wiesel's book Night. How he was able to create meaning. Even in the camps, or that movie, A Beautiful Life, where that father tries to create beauty for his son when they're at a concentration camp. There's something sacred and indestructible in the human spirit, I guess, whatever you want to say is the source of it. And we're going to have to guard that flame. If the more pessimistic one of the two of us is right, then we're going to really need to guard that flame, and really going to need to augment it. And hopefully, if you're right, there'll be we'll then see an opportunity for a resistance that will hopefully be effective.
Well, I really appreciate our disagreements about this, because we really overlap so much, and I do agree with you deeply about the importance of finding beauty within ourselves and within the people we love. So there's a poem that some of you may know, because it's often given to people when they're suffering a heartbreak. And it's by Derek Walcott. It was just a wonderful poet. And the poem, I think, is appropriate for now. So I'm going to read it, and then we'll just wave goodbye. What do you think, John?
Please do. I haven't heard this poem, and I've been looking forward to it.
Okay. It's called Love After Love. The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, "Sit here, eat." You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit, feast on your life.
That's beautiful, Harry. So I guess we're saying, folks, love your inner stranger.
Yes.
You're going to need him.
Good night, everyone. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Bye-bye.